on an agenda that speaks to the needs of the working class and the middle class and low income people who have for so many years really had their needs ignored. So I am confident. Look, there are differences of opinion. Every one of the Democrats.
Welcome back, everybody. Here's a daily news report and fourth stimulus check update. President Biden is now willing to drop the corporate tax rate to get an infrastructure deal done. And White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says that President Biden is willing to pass more stimulus relief for struggling Americans.
Let me quote Larry Summers, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of the Treasury and Barack Obama's head of the Council of Economic Advisors. He said at the beginning of the year that the previous package, the so-called rescue package, would create a wave of inflation. And only this week he reiterated that happened just as he predicted, but it also included this extra bonus on top of state unemployment insurance.
But still, Joe Biden does not have a deadline for an infrastructure deal. And the White House even said that he is willing to drop his corporate tax hike in exchange for getting a deal done sooner. What are your thoughts on this, everybody? Will President Biden send out a fourth stimulus check this year? Tell me your thoughts on this in the comments below.
Basically, if you look at the infrastructure and all that into it, they're looking at something. There's a jobs portion of that, and there's just traditional infrastructure. So if they're going to split that apart, and they've talked about doing that too. I haven't gotten intricately into that with the White House yet, and I'm glad that Shelley's doing, and she's doing a great job out there trying to find that sweet spot, if you will. So she'll report back. She's part of our G20 group, 10 Democrats, 10 Republicans. She'll report back next week. We'll see where she is on this and what we can do to assist and help get it over the line. It needs to be done. We need to do something in a bipartisan way. We can't continue on these types of projects because we were able to bring everything to fruition working through a bipartisan.
Now, everybody, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said that Biden intends to continue negotiations next week with Republicans, led by Senator Shelley Moore Capito, and said the White House is open to a wide range of potential ways to pay for a bill as Republicans balk at tax hikes. At her daily press briefing, Jen Psaki said, "We're going to keep our options open to see what paths we can move forward on." The Washington Post reported Thursday that President Biden told Senator Capito during their meeting at the White House that he might be willing to take his proposed 21% to 28% corporate tax hike off the table. Now, this would undo the tax cuts pushed for by the former president and adopted by the GOP back in 2017. But it's also considered a non-starter by Republicans. In exchange, folks, Biden will seek the tax hike later, outside of the infrastructure package, and settle for a new minimum corporate tax rate of 15% on global income. And that's to target corporations that pay little to nothing to the federal government annually. Jen Psaki twice confirmed that Biden does not have a deadline for an infrastructure deal before deciding that Democrats should attempt to ram through a bill without any Republican votes using special budget reconciliation rules.
Going to raise the kind of revenue that we need in order to fund the proposals that the president's put forward. Again, you look at something like the American Jobs Plan, the infrastructure vision that the president's put out. The entire thing is paid for across 15 years. By year 16, the deficit's going down, and he does it without asking one penny from the middle class.
But if this budget proposal, the $6 trillion budget proposal, which encompasses those things, actually lets those tax rates expire, that tax cut expire, and it's premised on that being part of the funding for this plan, doesn't it equate to a tax hike on people making less than $400,000 a year?
You know, I feel like there are some politicians hoping to have a hypothetical debate about decisions Congress will make in 2025 to get out of the real debate we're having in 2021 about what tax policy ought to be right now. The president is saying that we've got to make sure corporations and the wealthy pay their fair share.
Psaki stated he's going to continue to have conversations with Democrats and Republicans about what the path forward may look like. Biden has talked about wanting to sign a bill into law this summer. We've seen Speaker Pelosi talk about how she wants to move forward with infrastructure in June. And we've seen Senator Leader Chuck Schumer talk about how he wants to move forward with infrastructure in July. And those are some realities in the timeline. But guys, some Democrats want to ram Biden's large original package through Congress without any Republican votes using budget reconciliation. And that's like what they did back in March to pass Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus bill.
Well, thank you, Madam President. Good morning to everyone. Secretary Gina Raimondo, Secretary Deb Haaland, I want to thank you both on behalf of the President and myself, for your leadership. I have watched closely as you have taken the helm at the Department of Commerce and the Department of the Interior, respectively, and I see how dedicated you have been throughout your careers to improving the lives of the American people, of all people. Thank you. And thank you, President Shannon Halsey, for that kind introduction. Our nation-to-nation relationship is of utmost importance to me and to President Joe Biden. And here's the truth. Indigenous communities have shaped our nation throughout our history. Native Americans have defended our nation as members of the military, built up our nation as entrepreneurs and educators, enriched our nation as artists and academics, and kept our nation safe by providing access to the COVID-19 vaccines. And yet, we know that disparities, deep disparities, persist in tribal communities. Disparities in pay for Native American women, disparities in education for Native American students, disparities in health care for Native American families, barriers to voting for members of tribal nations, and barriers to affordable and accessible high-speed internet on tribal lands. Last month, I met with several community leaders to discuss the need for high-speed internet in their communities. They came from urban and rural areas and Indian country. They represent parents, students, farmers, and tribal leaders. In fact, Dr. Aaron Payment, the chairperson of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, joined me that day. He described how broadband infrastructure runs through tribal lands as well as other private and federal lands, which makes it difficult for tribes to ensure high-speed internet gets to their members. In fact, he said, tribes have, and I quote, checkerboard reservations across rural internet deserts, meaning it's just not straight through. In fact, according to Chairperson Payment, across his tribe's service areas, nearly 40% of people lack access to high-speed internet, 40%. And the lack of reliable access has resulted in a lack of vital services. And we know that. Almost everyone through the pandemic has understood that access to internet creates access to services. So lack of access to services means a lack of access to vital needs that families and individuals have. And then compounding the disparities that persist, the disparities that existed before